This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, great. So let me come here. Firstly, I do not even have a virtual machine. So let me go ahead and create a virtual machine for myself. So we'll do that. And let's say virtual machine. And let's create a Windows Server 2019 machine out here. So let's say create new. And let's say this is Octopus, the name of the resource group. Say OK. And say this is Jenkins VM, the same thing that we given yesterday. Let's say ECS2. And let's say 2019 data center, which is great. And let's increase the size a bit. Let's say D2S basically, which is like 2 core CPU, because that's what we need right now. Let's say test user. Let's say Microsoft hyphen 001 01. Okay. And let's allow a couple of ports like HTTP and HTTPS out here. And I don't need any licensing and etc. Premium disk is okay, good with me. Networking, I'm okay with this. Management, I will just disable the boot diagnostics. Just say advanced, review and create. And just we'll just go through the creation process out here. I'll say okay, fine, this is great, not a problem. Let's say create. Now let's open up the drawing board that we had yesterday, and let's see what we are trying to do or what we are attempting to do today. Okay, so open an existing diagram out here, and let's go to our Jenkins diagram, which is, let's say, in this particular folder, and let's say Jenkins. Okay, sorry, it was not there. Just let's say folders, Jenkins, say create. So here again, so we had a Jenkins pipeline right now. So we are creating something called as a project in Jenkins, and we are now relying upon an open repository like GitHub. Like yesterday, what we did is we just went ahead into that particular repository called GitHub. There was some code inside it. We took that code and we were able to build that code, right? We were able to build that code using Jenkins. And now I want to take this code that is already built and use a tool called Octopus. Now, Octopus is a continuous deployment tool that we have out there in the market, which is an open source tool. You also have a license version for it. Initially, it will be an open source tool as such, and then deploy it on top of Azure DevOps. Now, why do you want Octopus when you already have Azure DevOps? Is because you have certain projects where the client requirement is that what, we use Octopus because we have already bought licensing for Octopus server. We do not want to use Azure DevOps. Can you do it? Yes. For this, you need to have a know-how. You need to understand the working of Octopus out here. So what we will be doing is we will be exploring a tool called Octopus Deploy out here. So let's say Octopus Deploy, and let's visit the website for them. And one thing, believe me guys, is that after Azure DevOps, which has a very great documentation, Octopus has some amazing documents out there. Octopus has a great amount of documentation out there where you can go ahead, and they are very, very, very self-explanatory on how do you do it. Like if you are coming from an Azure DevOps background, it's very much easier for you to understand how you are going to do everything that you're kind of doing, let's say in Azure DevOps and etc. For which what I'll do is, like, I'll say resources and I'll say documentation. Very importantly, it's saying okay, fine, you have some getting started videos and etc. And I am going to look at something known as an end-to-end CI/CD tutorials. I'll say okay, fine, I want to basically do an end-to-end CI/CD, and I'll say just dismiss, and I'll say it's now asking me for a couple of options. Now all we are doing today is trying to understand how you can use the existing documentation with minimal amount of modifications and then use the same thing in your project. I am saying my version control is Git, my code is in Git, the language is ASP.NET Core. Build server, I will say instead of TeamCity, I will say Jenkins. Package repository, I will say built-in Octopus. And target, I will not say Kubernetes, I will say, let's say Azure Web App. So I'll say, okay, fine, ASP.NET Core, Jenkins, it's ASP built-in, sorry, it's Octopus built-in. I'll say it is Azure Websites. As and when I change this, now see the entire diagram kind of got changed. So the diagram is now telling that, you know what, you have a Git repository, good. You have the code inside it. How you're building your code using Jenkins, how you're releasing your code into Octopus, and where you're releasing your code is on Azure Websites. And as and when you click this option, right, if you just scroll down, it says, you know what, you have the entire tutorial for you. Please go ahead with this. And I'll say read tutorial. First thing, you will get a very beautiful video out here, really, in the starting of it. You'll say, okay, fine, this is your video and all that stuff. You can also say, instead of me going ahead and, kind of doing, let's say, the entire process, I can also try the test drive VMs they have. They will give you some VMs which are pre-configured. You can also use that. And you also have a beautiful video out here explaining you the entire process on how to do it. But what we'll rely is that we'll rely upon the documentations and we'll do it ourselves. So it needs firstly a prerequisite out here. It says you need Git, you need Jenkins, and you need something known as an Octopus CLI. You need .NET Core SDK, and you need the Octopus deploy out here. And then it's saying, okay, fine, this is the .NET SDK, you can download it here. Octopus deploy, you can download it here. It's a free tool and etc. You can download and all that stuff. It says Azure Websites is something that you need to create. And then it says, you know what, you have a source code. And then you finally say it's telling you that, you know what, you have an Octopus API key. So what we will do today is that firstly, I'll go into my server. I'll go into my virtual machine and I'll firstly configure Jenkins, which will take about 5 minutes or so. So let me open up my RDP session and I'll say, great, take this out. And I'll say, just give the username and password. I'll say, okay. And I'll log into the server. And since the yesterday's server basically is not usable anymore, I'll have to reconfigure Jenkins here. So again, that's just going to take like about 5 minutes or so. So we'll just allow this time and we'll configure this, and then we will configure something known as an Octopus. We will see how this works out. Okay. So here I am, and I'll go into the server configuration and disable firstly my internet advanced security so that I'll be able to go ahead and use the server out. So let me go here and let me go into the local server and let me disable the IE enhanced security. Let me say off, and say okay. So IE is disabled. Like, just give it a refresh. This should go from on to off. It's done. Let me open my Internet Explorer. So we need a couple of things, right? Even before we do Jenkins, we need what? We need, yesterday when we looked at what all softwares that we need, guys. Git,
Git.
right? So we need a Git. We need Java 11, and we need what? .NET SDK. These are the three things that we need. Even the documentation is talking about the same, right? Even the documentation here is telling the same. In prerequisites, you need Git, Jenkins, and inside Jenkins, you need Java and everything, and you need a .NET SDK. And then finally, you can go ahead and configure Octopus, is what they are trying to tell you out here. So what I'm going to do is, like, I'll just go ahead, firstly download Git out here. Say download Git for Windows. So this is going to be a good revision for everyone who's not practiced it. So again, please follow this out. So I'll say Git for Windows, download Git. I'll say run. And I'll say next, and install this out. So just a plain installation that I'm doing out here on top of my virtual machines, on top of my server. So while this is going on, yeah, go ahead,
Small
Akira.
doubt was whenever we open the new RTPs, we should install three of them.
No, you don't have to. Whenever you create a new machine, you have to install, not a new RDP.
Yeah.
One-time installation procedure. for a machine. Does that answer your question, Akila?
Yeah, yes. Thank you.
Okay. Then I'll say Java 11 download. Java 11 JDK download. I'll say great, this is the download section that I need, and I'll say okay, fine. This is the software which is 64-bit installer is what I need. I'll just download this out. I'll say okay, fine. I know that this is required. I'll say okay, fine, download. I'll say download, and I'll just get the Jenkins user. Sorry, the user out here. So let's see Jenkins. Where are you? Jenkins, and I'll just need the username out here. So I'll copy the username, and I'll say okay, fine. This is the username, and I'll say Microsoft hyphen 001 is the password, and I'll say run. So I'm installing the Java 11 software so that before I install Jenkins, I'll keep it available. So this is done. Like it'll take a minute to go ahead and install this out. I'll say close. Now finally, I'll install what? .NET SDK, .NET Core SDK. So I'll say .NET SDK download. I'll say okay, fine. Go to this particular download section, and I'll say this is the current version that I want, and this is the x64-bit version, which is 5.0, and I'll say run. And now the installation process will start, and it'll take a minute to go ahead and install the .NET SDK 5. And once this is done, or once this is while this is in progress, I know this will take a minute or so. I'll now go ahead and finally install the Jenkins on this particular server. So let's go ahead and try doing that also. This is done. I'll close this out. Say not for the site. Now I'll say Jenkins download for Windows. I'll say great. Please go ahead. Give me the 2.3. Whatever version is stable. And I'll say download. I'll say run. Say next. I'll say this is the folder where Jenkins will be downloaded and installed. I'll say firstly, before this giving this account, if I do a test user out here, and then do a Microsoft hyphen 001, and I'll try to test the credential. It'll say you do not have the sufficient privileges. And Akila, in your case, when you had an issue, right? I did not select this option. I selected this option. Since your user account was giving, I selected run it as a local system. Though not recommended, solves the purpose.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll say administrative tools. Local system again. I'll say local policies, user right administration, log on, sorry, not this one, not the local, log on as a service. So this one is something that I'm really interested into, and I'll add a user or a group. I'll say test user. Say check names. The name is there. Say add this one out. I'll say apply. Say okay. Come back to my installation visit. Set test credentials. Should be good. Port 8080 test this port should be good. I'll say next, and I'll say next, and I'll say install. So see, this process is done. It's installed. So Akila, the issue that you were having is that your account that you added, right? It's not being registered for auto logon. So which is an operating system issue. You should have just rebooted and kind of deleted the machine and created a new machine. It will help you out in that way. Okay.
Okay.
So just registering Jenkins right now. So the service will be started here. And I'll go to this particular folder. Not not the equal to. Let's take the equal to out, otherwise it's going to give you an error. I'll open the notepad, copy the password, the initial setup password out here, paste it out here, continue, and I'll say select install the suggested plugins and so it's going to take like about 2 minutes. So it's going to install all the plugins, and finally we need to do what? We need to configure Git in this one in Jenkins. Inside the global tool configuration, we need to go there and we need to configure Git. We need to just make sure to give it the path for git.exe. This is what we are going to do, right? And after that, we'll start the Octopus installation procedure. How are we going to do that? We'll use the same documentation out here on the server so that we don't have to come here and there. We'll use the same documentation. And we'll see how to do this. So we will start with the very basic steps. We will start with the basic step out here. So this is the first thing that they want to. So firstly, prerequisites, we are done with the prerequisites. We are done with all the prerequisites. One thing that we do not do out here is use something known as an Octopus CLI, which we will do, let's say, in a while. The next, it says, okay, fine, you know what, you can download the Octopus server here, and Octopus server needs a SQL database to be installed on your machine, because Octopus server or Octopus as a software uses SQL in the backend in order to store the data. Right now I haven't installed it. I know basically go ahead and install it during the installation of Octopus deploy. So let me firstly go ahead and create the Jenkins out here. So first say test user, I'll say Microsoft -001 Microsoft -001. I give one, yes I give one. I'll say Microsoft -001. I'll say Jenkins user test@gmail.com, some ID here, that's it, to authenticate myself, and I'll say save and continue. I'll say yes, this instance is good. I'll say save and finish. Just start using Jenkins. This is now going to give me the Jenkins dashboard. The first thing that I'll do here is, guys, go to manage Jenkins, go to global tool configuration, and it's pointing out to git.exe, right? So I'll say okay, fine, go to this particular folder, wherever is git, program files, git, and say bin, and this git.exe. So copying this path here, going here, I'm saying git.exe, apply and save. So I'm just configuring git as of now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm done with my Jenkins configuration. Now whatever I had to do, I am like done with Jenkins. Now what I'll do is I'll come here and I'll say, in going into this link which is called Octopus deploy out here, and I'll say open. It says it's a 64-bit installer. I understand you are on a 64-bit machine. Do you want to download it? I'll say download. I'll say okay, fine. It's saying Octopus is downloading shortly. I'll say run. It's a 1.52 GB software, but since we are on a server, it's going to be very fast. So it says okay, fine. I will now start the Octopus server installation. Now we are doing what? We are installing the Octopus server on the same machine where Jenkins is there. I'll say next. I'll say I accept and agree to all these terms and conditions. I'll say next. I'll say install. So the first thing what I'm doing is I'm installing the Octopus server as suggested by this particular link. So in my prerequisites, if I look into it, it says, you know what, you need an Octopus server deploy and all, and then you'll have to basically install the Octopus server. So let's wait for this process to complete and we will see what it needs out here, and then we'll start playing around with the Octopus server. Guys, any questions still here on why we are doing and what we are doing out here? Now since Jenkins was already done, I've moved a bit fast, but with Octopus let's go a bit slow and understand what we are doing in each and every step. Okay, Any questions still here, guys? Okay, let's say finish. And this is now going to open, let's say, the installation wizard for Octopus. And it's saying, okay, fine, I'm checking something. And I'll say great. I'll say get started. Now it says, okay, fine, you want a license key. So I do not have a license key out here. I'll say I can create a free license key for Octopus. It says I'm using a server, not a cloud. Okay, I'm using a server, not a cloud. I'll say start trial. It now asks me for company. I'll just say it is Microsoft, something like this. I'll say this is Jenkins. Last name is user. So I'm a Jenkins user. And it now says, you know what? Give me an ID. Give me a Gmail ID or any ID basically where I can go ahead and authenticate you. Now, one thing that you have to just observe is that the ID that you are giving it, like they'll give you one license per an ID. Okay, so if you need a new ID, just create one and you can create it out. Okay, for me, I have already an existing ID from from a very old class, so I can just take this ID. I can go into my server and I can say at gmail.com. This is the ID that I want to create, and this tick mark is there, and I'll say just give a password to it, the same password what I give to a lot of things. Microsoft -001. I'll say I'm not a robot. It says okay fine, it's just telling me that okay fine, select all squares with fire hydrants. I don't even know what is that is. So let's say something like this. Let's say next, motorcycles, create. I'll say agree. Yeah, it's okay, fine. Okay, at the gmail.com, you must enter a valid ID address. Yes, I did enter a valid ID. Okay, let's see why it is not giving me. Say rvectors contributor at the gmail.com. Okay, so some space or something, I think that's the reason it might not give me this one. Now it's selling okay
Yeah,
fine, I'll verify it. Yeah,
How we should
there is a
create
space
email?
in starting.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Chandra, you had a question. I'm sorry.
Just saying that there was a space in starting
Yeah,
email.
okay. Yeah, that's the reason maybe it's not creating one. Yeah, Akila, you were asking.
Even if we don't have any email, how do we should create them?
Like just create a normal Gmail account, like for example
Okay, normal
Gmail.
Gmail account is enough.
Yeah, normal Gmail, simple Gmail, that's it. I just
Okay.
have a simple Gmail out here. So they should have by now sent an email to me in this particular Gmail account. So I'll just say sign in. I'll say next. I'll say Microsoft -001. I think this is the password that I put in for this one. Okay, it says it's not recognized. Let's see. Let's try to open this out in another tab here, or I'll just try to give my number here and get the verification done. Any number will work here since we are using from a server, right? That's the reason it probably is asking for a security code and all that stuff. So let's give a second and let's enter the security code out here. Yes, got the security code. So let's see. It's 988459. So let's say 988459 is what the security code is, and I'll say next. I'll say not now. Unsupported browser, okay. Let's say basic HTML view, not a problem. So this is the only thing that I want. It says verify your email. I'll come here and I'll say okay fine, confirm my email address. So now it's like taking me to the Octopus page back again, and it's just giving you a verification email, and I'm just verifying this up. That's it. So it says great. Now you have verified this email. Now it says what I am now giving you, let's say a free trial license out here. It's just a free trial license out here, valid till 1 month. I'll copy this license. I'll go into my installation screen out here. I'll paste this license out here. Didn't get copied properly in the first time. So let me go ahead copy this entire thing out here. Go to this particular screen of setup installation. Just paste it out here. That's it. Say next. It says okay, fine. This is the folder that I'm going to install Octopus on. I'll say great. Go ahead, do next. And I'll say use a local system account. I'm good with it. If you have an organization domain, right, you can also go ahead and use that. You can use a domain account out here. For example, I can say select user and I can say test user out here. I can also use this account, but I'll prefer using the local system here because it has all the privileges what we need. Now it says okay, fine, you do not have a database. I will actually need a database. I will basically go ahead, I will need something known as a SQL database basically. Do you want to install it? I'll say yes. In this link, right, in this installation link, I had download SQL Express. I'll come here and I'll say the basic one is like good for me, and I'm just downloading this and I'm installing this out. So very simple installation procedure. I'm installing a SQL server, like it'll just be like an SSMS out here. I'm installing this particular SQL server in my local machine. Those documentations are again very great to follow, guys. Like these are like really excellent documentations to follow. They'll tell you each and every step on what you need to do, how you need to configure your continuous integration, and then how do you need to basically deploy the Octopus and all that stuff. So let's follow it step by step, and we'll be able to understand what that is. So I'll say it's a new SQL server installation, and I'll say okay, fine, and I agree all these terms and conditions, and I'll say next. I'll say okay, fine, this is recommended, but I'm okay with that. It's just saying it's just installing all the setup files and all that stuff. It's giving a warning for Windows Firewall, which is okay with me. I'll say next. I'll say next. It says okay, fine, this is the SQL instance that I will create. It's called SQL Express. I'll say okay, I'm good with it. And now it says what is the server configuration, and it'll probably ask you for a password and etc. So it says okay, fine, this is the service account that I'll be using and all that stuff, and I'll say great. Let's give it a second so that you go ahead and install it. So it says Windows authentication mode. I'll say mixed mode, enter, and I can also go ahead and use the Windows authentication mode, which is like by default. I'll say next, and I'll just install the server. So whatever was there, whatever was by default, I'm going ahead and doing that. So let's add this to our list. Even before you install Octopus or during the installation of Octopus, you will need what? You need a SQL server to be installed. On the Windows machine, on let's say the 2019 Windows server. So this is my list basically that I kind of maintain basically when I'm installing any software, any piece of software, and etc. So now I'm going ahead and installing this particular piece of software called as a SQL server, and then I'll come back to my Octopus again. So let's give it a second and let's go ahead and install this out. And just a heads up on what we're going to do out here right now is that firstly, go ahead and install the Octopus and then configure the continuous integration. It's just telling you even how you need to configure continuous integration in Jenkins. And now it needs a plugin known as what? Octopus. Here we need to basically install a plugin in Jenkins called Octopus, and we need to configure the plugin. Okay, this is something that they have not shown out here to how to configure the plugin and as such, and we'll also do that as well. Okay, so let's come back again to our prerequisites. Like this is where we are in Octopus deploy. So this will be done in a minute. And since this is a server, it is quick, guys. But when you're installing in your local, it will be a bit slow because server has a greater bandwidth and all that stuff. So it says, okay, fine. This is all getting installing. Any questions until this point, guys? Anything until this point that you're not able to understand? Anything?
Uh, so,
Mhm.
so for Octopus, whatever other tools we can use for the CI instead of Jenkins.
So if you can go back into this particular thing, right? So you have these options out here. Azure DevOps, Bamboo, TeamCity, Jenkins. You can use these kind of things out here for Octopus out here. These are the very famous available tools out here. So you can mix and match your combination. If you want to learn about TeamCity, Octopus will also teach you about TeamCity out there. Now to do a CI on that. Okay.
Okay.
So let's come back again to Jenkins. I'll say Octopus and I'll say your websites. I'll say read my tutorial and just come back to our prerequisites. So great. So this is installed. This is done. I'll say close. We'll come back to my Octopus. This is where I am. And I'll select my server. Now I automatically got this server and I'll say Windows Authentication. And Octopus is telling that what I want to create a database called Octopus Deploy. This is the database I want to. So will you am I okay with this? I'll say yes, great. You go ahead and create it. It says the database it does not exist. Would you want me to automatically create it? I'll say yes. Go ahead and create it. It says in order to allow, yes. I'll say okay, grant the access. And it says I listen on a port called 80. This is the port that I want to listen on. And where is Jenkins listening? 8080. So two different ports out here that I'm kind of opening out. I'll say fine. And now I'll say I will give the username and password for Octopus. So let's say test user, the same thing what I gave to Jenkins. Email ID is something like whatever email ID that we have kind of registered with Octopus out here. So I think it is something like this one. Okay, where is my email ID? It is, yeah. I'll just take this email ID and I'll register it with Octopus here so that it will be consistent across. So no spaces here. So just taking on the spaces and I'll just give the default password. I'll say install. This is what Octopus is now doing it. Now Octopus is finally installing the service known as Octopus on your laptop or on your computer, on your machine, on your server, wherever it is. Now it's saying, okay, fine, I'm starting the service called as octopus.exe and so on and so forth. And now it's registering this particular service. So it's just installing the entire Octopus server after you have gone through all these steps out here. So let's go ahead and install this out. And after the installation is done, let's generate something known as an API key. We'll see why we are using that API key and all that stuff. We'll go through those steps also, and we'll understand while doing this documentation, we'll understand why is each and every step required out here. Now it says, okay, fine, installation is done, happy deployments, and I'll say finish. And now this is your Octopus tool. You can now go ahead and say open in browser. So whatever I don't need, I'll just close it out. So I don't need this tab, I don't need this tab, I don't need all these tabs out here. We need this one because this is the documentation that we are following. And now it's opening the local host on 8080. Sorry, on 80, sorry. Let's say 80. Now I'm opening the Octopus service. Because there are two things out here. One, I have a service on running on 8080, which is Jenkins server. And I have the Octopus deploy that is running on the port 80. So two things I have and I can basically use this out. And like yesterday, you can open up the firewall and also use it from your local machine. Like, not mandatory that you have to log into the server every time. So let's give it a second. So it'll load it'll take initially a bit of time in order to load the server here, and it'll say okay, fine, this is how your server looks and stuff like that. So let's give it a minute. So I have installed Octopus and Jenkins both on the same Windows machine. Both Jenkins and Octopus are being installed on both of the machines. Now, couple of things what we need to do out here. One thing is that I need Jenkins to push something to Octopus. What do I need Jenkins to push? I need Jenkins to push the generated artifact. So can Jenkins do that right away? No. Jenkins needs a plugin called as Octopus Deploy. Jenkins works on all called plugins, right? So Jenkins needs a Octopus plugin out here. And in order to authenticate Octopus, it needs something known as an API key. That is what we are going to generate. So the first thing that we are trying to do is establish a connection between Jenkins and Octopus and get ready with this process. Second thing what we need to do is configure something in Octopus, like something known as infrastructure and all in Octopus, and create a connection between our Azure portal and the Octopus server that we are on. These are the two things that we are now looking to do. So let me come back. Yeah, it says it will take some time. Let me load this out. And yes, this is the web portal, and this is how I can browse it. Just start the service. Yeah, it says Octopus server is running and all. I know that. So let's wait for some time. This will take initially some time in order to load the service and all. Let me try doing this. Port 80. Or let me just go here and just copy the link here. That's more easier to do. And I've seen like this service taking like about 10 minutes also sometimes in order to start up. If it still doesn't start up right now, let's give the machine a bit of restart and then try to do it again. Like that kind of works out in most of the cases. Okay, let's close this out. It's not still working, so let's say close all tabs. Say close the service, close all these things, and I'll just give a restart to this machine. I don't need this. I'll just say come down. I'll just click this and come down to the Azure portal and just give it a restart. So I'm just restarting all the services that are running in the backend so that they'll kind of load back again. I'm just hoping that it'll load back again. Okay, so this is done. It is restarted. So give it a second so that the machine will again come back running. So now I'll say click this URL, just go to MSTC. And let's try to open the service once again. Yeah, so there was clearly an issue with the machine and all. So yeah, let's refresh. Let's try to again log into the server. So this happens, guys, like when installation is done and we don't restart the machine and all that stuff, right? This is a very common issue that you kind of face out. So let's come back again. Let's try to do this. Okay, and let's start the service out. Let's say let's just go open up the Octopus and see if it's running. Just go to the Octopus manager. Yeah, and it says the service is running. Let's try to open this out. Let's also try open up our Jenkins server in the backend. And it was running on localhost 8080. So localhost 8080 and give it a try, and we'll open up the Jenkins also. So I'll say test user. Still loading the service. So all this is good, like all this is like really good out here, but the service is still it's still taking some time in order to load out. Let's try restarting this out. And it's now saying that the Octopus service is running, which is good. Let's try to load this up again. If it still doesn't load like in 5 minutes, guys, it's okay, we can close the session out, and just follow this documentation. Just in case if it doesn't load, just follow this documentation. I'll get the server running. I'll just try to kind of pre-install it before our class on Monday. I'll try to pre-install this out and kind of run the service out. But until this point, any questions, guys? Anything that I can take? Any questions?
And one thing, where we should put the code, like I give us the path.
The path as in the code as in the ASP.NET Full Framework?
Yeah.
So that is in Jenkins. So in Jenkins, right? So we would say new item, and we'll say it's a project called random code. Say freestyle project. We'll say okay. And here is where you put the here is where you put the code. It says git, and you're giving a repository URL out here. And the repository URL, I just picked it from this particular documentation. Like you have that git repository, right? The source code.
Yeah, yes.
I just picked it here. That's it. So I'm just taking this HTTP and just placing it out here. That's it. This is how I'm just placing it out, and I'm making sure that it's just there. That's it. So this is just the URL. This is how I'm doing it in the source control manager. And just say save and apply. Yeah, it's still taking time. Let's see. Okay, until this loads, at least let's configure Jenkins, and let's try to get out of first build pipeline out here. So what I'll do is like I'll just go to the continuous integration section of this, and what it tells me out here is that firstly you'll clone the code. Secondly, it's asking you to download a plugin called Octopus Deploy in Jenkins. Meaning, if I come back here and if I say manage Jenkins out here, and if I say manage plugins, you will have a plugin for Octopus. go to available and say Octopus deploy. Just say install without restart. Why is this plugin required? Very simple. At the end of the Jenkins build, right? At the end of the particular build pipeline, you're trying to generate what? An artifact. You're trying to generate an artifact and then push it to the Octopus server. And you're trying to generate the artifact and push it to the Octopus server and letting Octopus then do the deployment onto Azure App Services. This is what you're trying to do out here. This is what you're rather trying to achieve out here, right? This is what you're doing out here. So you need something in Jenkins to tell it that, hey, you know what, you need to point out to a server called as Octopus. You need to point out to a service called as Octopus. That is where the plugin comes into picture. Now it says, okay, fine, this is installed, and let's see if our Octopus is any better. No, it is still the same. Let's come here and let's go to manage Jenkins, and in the configure system out here, it says this is Jenkins host URL and all that stuff. This is good. Like, I don't need anything out here. Yes, this is the issue. Now it says, can you please set a server ID for Jenkins? Like, you know, please give me the server ID for Jenkins and all that stuff. How do you take it? You'll have an ID for your service. Now this is what it's telling you, that, you know what, if you come down, go to manage plugin and install that plugin, and, you know, go back to this. This is where you are configuring the system, and you're saying the server ID is local and it's running on a local host, right? Meaning this is running on my local. So I'll say it is local, and it's asking for a URL for Octopus. This is the URL for my Octopus. So if I just copy this out, meaning it's just this one, right? So if I just copy this out, the entire thing, come here and paste it out here. This is the entire URL and running on port what, 80. This is just the host URL of Octopus. Now it is asking you for an API key, meaning how can me as a Jenkins go ahead and authenticate your Octopus server? So once this loads, right, you will have something known as an account, and you can generate something known as an API key out here. That's the API key that you are going to provide. The machine is definitely not in my control. There is some issue with the machine as such. You will have something known as an API key that you generate here. So in the prerequisites, if you kind of look at this one, right, it says Octopus API key. It says, okay, fine, go to this particular web portal, and under that web portal, the first page will look something like this. And under your profile, you can go ahead and generate something known as an API key out here. This is how it will actually look. But today it's taking more time than what I kind of expect out here. Normally it doesn't take so much of time, but not sure why the service is behaving a bit, you know, strange. Let's try to do stop and try to start the service back again. Like, it's not even giving me any errors and etc. So, okay, fine, logs directory. Let's see if there are any errors as such. It says info test connection is successful, which is great. Yeah, there is no error at all. Like, there is no error at all. It's just Octopus is, like, you know, behaving a bit strange today. Let's try to see this. Let's try to stop the service. Yeah, it says Octopus is stopped currently, and kind of this one. Let's say start the service back again. Okay, now it's saying Octopus is running. Let's try to do this, and over port 8080, sorry, over port 80 is where Octopus is running. Yeah, again it's coming back to the same screen. Okay, now if it takes more time, guys, I don't want to waste your time today. Let us give it 2 more minutes. If it doesn't happen, it's okay, we'll just break today, and we can kind of meet on Monday and we can discuss more on, we can discuss on how to configure the Octopus server and etc. But my request is just try following this documentation. Try following this documentation. I'll send the link across to you all. Try to follow out this documentation for Octopus. Let's see if you are able to do it. Let's see if you're able to configure this out. Now, this sometimes takes like about 15 minutes to even start up. So I have, also seen such a kind of a load times as such. So this, takes time. It's okay for me to kind of, say that, to be on a safer side, it's okay for me to tell that it is like taking time right now. Let me also try this one. Let me disable the firewall and try to see this out. Maybe something is acting up on the firewall as such. Let's say advanced settings, and let me open up the port 80 as such. It's a new rule. Say port 80. So let me add an inbound rule for this and an outbound rule also. Now this is the issue what you face with open sources, guys. You have limited support. If you go for licensing, yes, but Azure DevOps is even more better than all these services as such. But since we are learning about it, we need to know what are the pros and cons. It will actually be a very good example to see what is the issue and how you kind of try to resolve this out. Let's say next. Let's say out. Let's say 80. Let's say finish this out. And let's try to take the same URL. Let me first try kicking the server up here. Let's say restart. Still trying to do this. Let's say take the server ID, particular service, port 80, and it's opening up the Octopus deploy out here. See, so I am now opening up the Octopus deploy. Let's say on a service from my local machine, and I've kind of unblocked the firewall also. So I don't see any reason for any blockages for this particular service. The service should run technically, but not sure what is the issue with Octopus today. So let's check this out. It's still trying to load. Let's allow it one more minute out here, and let's call it a day if it doesn't work out. Any questions till this point, guys? Any questions with the Jenkins configuration as such? Anything?
Yeah. What more tools we are pending to learn?
Dockers and Kubernetes. These are the two things that we are kind of pending on. So it's going to be Docker and it's going to be Azure Kubernetes services. These are the two things that we are going to see, and we are going to see how to integrate it with Azure DevOps. Okay. So if you ask me for a deadline, then I would say we will be able to cover this in the next week. So by the end of the next week, all of our syllabus would be covered. It's safe to say that all of our syllabus would be covered by the end of the next week. And after that, we'll just do a demo project with whatever we learned till now on Azure DevOps. We'll go to repos, we'll integrate our branching policies and etc. Do a CI and do a CD along with ARM templates. And also let's integrate PowerShell. That's something that we haven't done till now. We'll also integrate PowerShell with Azure DevOps and see how it works out. So these are the two things basically that are pending, and a project basically in which I'll explain how to do it and explain basically an end-to-end scenario. Okay. Any more questions on this, Sanjay? Sorry, Chandra, are you good with this? Are you good with this execution?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Finally, if you see this.
Yeah, okay.
So this is the issue with open sources, guys. You won't find enough logs and all that stuff. So it's going to be an issue. I'll say remember me on this computer and I'll say enter this out. And this is what finally Octopus will look like. I'm happy that I was at least able to show this out, because there will be issues basically that you face on this one out. And even if you go into the server, it'll probably, it's still loading on the server. See, so there is some kind of an issues basically with Octopus, and I observed this a lot with especially open sources. So let's do one thing. Let's go to this profile, and what I'll do is I'll say my API keys, and I'll say new API key out here. I'll say it is for Jenkins integration, and I'll say generate new. I'll copy this out, copy the entire key out, and I'll go into my Jenkins server and I'll paste this out. That's it. This is what I wanted to do out here. But I pasted all these things out, and I'll say apply. I'll say save. The first of very thing that I do is integrate Jenkins with Octopus. This is how I integrated Jenkins with Octopus right now. Second thing, what it's asking me to do right now is that if you go to the documentation, API key is done. In the continuous integration process, it's telling, okay, fine, this is the source code you need to basically download and all that stuff. And now it's telling you to integrate. Now you install the plugin, you configured the plugin, which is great. Now it says, okay, fine, now create a new Jenkins project, call it as something like this. This is the source code. And yesterday, like we did, right, we are polling the source code manager for every 5 minutes. We are polling what? The ACM for every 5 minutes. So I'll come down to my project, I'll configure my project out here. Until now we have only defined what my source code manager is, and I'll say in the triggers, I'll say poll the ACM, poll it for every 5 minutes, meaning just see what is there, and if you have something, give it to me. So instead of a continuous integration, I'm doing a scheduled out here. And then secondly, it says, okay, fine, this is how you set your trigger. Secondly, in the build section, it is telling execute batch command, something that we did yesterday, right? Now it's telling, okay, fine, do a .NET test. Now I don't want to do a .NET test out here. I will do a .NET build, and I will say, or I'll just do a .NET publish out here, and this is the command that I'm going to use. So I'll just copy this out. I'll say, okay, fine, in the build, I'll add a step. I'll say execute a Windows batch command, and this is the command that I want to execute out, which is nothing but a .NET publishing out. And now if you go here, it says, okay, fine, you know what, .NET publish is great. Now you want to go ahead and add something known as Octopus deploy, and then the package of the application and all that stuff. So you're not now doing what? You're not doing, let's say, an application packaging. You're not doing an application packaging using the archive artifacts. Rather, you are adding a build section out here. You are adding another build section out here, and you are now invoking Octopus to package your application. You are invoking Octopus to what? Package your application. Now this is going to take some time in order to follow all these steps and in order to configure this, guys. So I'd say it is better that we continue the class on Monday, which will be good enough, because I don't want to rush on this right now and kind of continue. But just giving you an overview, what we are trying to do is we have configured Octopus. We'll basically integrate Octopus this way, and we'll just follow the entire documentation to see what they're doing. So my humble suggestion would be, just try to do this and just try to follow the entire documentation to see how you deploy with Octopus, and most importantly, how you integrate Octopus with Azure DevOps. Everything is like written in this documentation with along with screenshots and etc. If you're still not following it, you also have a video out here. Like in the start of it, you had a video out here. You can also follow this out in order to integrate Octopus. But right now, if I need to do it, it'll take another hour. So I'm just delaying this process out here. So is this okay, guys? Can you all try doing this out? Can you all try doing Octopus and try to integrate it with Azure and see how it works out? Can you all try it out?
Yes, yes. Right.
Okay, and it takes some time, guys. See, Octopus is an open source again. It will take some time. You have no explanation. You have no reason why it took so much, so much long time. It shouldn't have ideally, taken so much time as such. But we have configured the tool in the right way. So The only thing I would request you all to do right now is go to the Octopus documentation. Just go Octopus deploy, resources, documentations, and say entire CI/CD. This is where you will say it's not Team City, it's Jenkins because we have learned Jenkins, and use Azure websites. You have a lot of targets like a lot of Tomcat and all that servers, but since we are aware with or since we are used with Azure Web Apps, just select this and just say read this tutorial. And I think I've also pasted the link, right? So please try this out. Try it on your own. See what are the challenges that you are facing. Make a list of all those challenges. We'll discuss about it on Monday when we meet this out. Okay. And I'm sorry I'm not able to give you a full demo of this because there of course is like a bit of time constraint basically out here that is acting out, and also the server is a bit kind of acting out as such. And also one quick thing, yesterday there was an entire downtime, there was an entire outage with Azure virtual machines. If you would have tried to use virtual machines yesterday, it would have given you a big error telling that it has failed and all that stuff. So again, the question is that how do you see whether a service in Azure is up or running? It's called status.azure.com. It will give you in a particular region what are the services up. If it's good, it's going to give you all green out here. If it is bad and all that stuff, it will tell you it's critical or in a warning state. It'll give you all the regions, whichever regions in the world Azure right now supports. So Azure supports America, US, Europe, and also you have Geo because Reliance US tied up with Azure and they have their own data centers. So you can also see this also. So please save this link. This is going to be very, very helpful because when you're trying to understand what's going wrong, the first thing that I will do is I'll start from here, seeing whether the services are up and running. And this is how I'll work my way backwards. Okay. Are you
So
all
yesterday
comfortable
in
with
which
this? Yeah.
location? Yesterday in which
In all
location?
the locations, all the locations, every location was impacted. Every location. It was impacted for 1 hour, and 1 hour is a very big time. But not all the virtual machines were impacted. There were few virtual machines which were impacted. So when I was working yesterday, I faced one issue with the build machines the build servers where we were using, and I had to raise a Microsoft ticket, and they then came to us and said that this is what the issue is and this is what we are working on and all that stuff. So you'll have to see which service that you're kind of looking for. For example, it has all the services what Azure kind of supports. It has a huge list of services, and you can see based upon the location. Yesterday all the virtual machines, right, they were in an orange color, in a warning color out here telling that what, there's an outage and all that stuff.
So at that case, in that cases, so what is that uh, applications which are used in this services?
I
Products.
didn't get I did not get your question, I'm sorry.
Actually, that 1 hour downtime, the applications which are running on Azure services. What about that one? Actually, it's a big loss, right?
Exactly. I mean,
To the
you
companies.
cannot. Yes, exactly. That's a loss. Simple. Like, because there is some physical server migration that was going on in the backend, and that did not work out properly, and that's the reason they had all these issues that was coming up. So there is like very straightforward answer is that you won't be able to use those services. Like you can ask Microsoft to expedite your process and all that stuff. You can raise a severity A ticket with them. They'll try to help you out, but there is something which is like beyond human control. Some things are like beyond human control, so it's simple. You cannot basically go for such a kind of a thing, and this is something that I observed. It's a very rare case scenario, very very rare case scenario. It does happen, yes, does happen, but Microsoft tells you that what, this is the SLA that I promised you. Like out of like 365 days, it'll be down for 1 hour, so it'll be down for 1 hour. I cannot help you with that. So that's the reason they consider everything and kind of give you an SLA out there. Does that answer the question, Srikanth?
Yeah. Yes.
once we had this Azure DevOps,
Mhm.
how
Mhm.
about Jenkins and Octopus? People are still using for other
There are
platform or
a few projects, yes. Other platforms are still using Jenkins, but Jenkins is slowly getting phased out with something like TeamCity, and there are a lot of open source tools that are available in the market today. But yes, there are a few projects where I have worked personally on Octopus servers and etc. because they are legacy projects and they were still using Octopus there because they have bought a lot of Octopus licensing and etc. So that is the reason we just need to know a know-how, like what really we just shouldn't be blank about if someone asks what is Jenkins or what is Octopus. But for the job role that we are really targeting, right, Azure DevOps is like the prime, this skill that we are kind of tested for. All these are good to know knowledge, because if you look at Octopus, Sanjay, it is almost same like what Azure DevOps is. When you try configuring this out, right, it's almost same. You have environments, you have dev, test, and production environment. You have all these things. It's like very, very, very similar to it. So it's a good to know information. Like if you go to through this tutorial, it'll be a very good to know information that how to basically that I can create this out, or how can I use this particular service, and what are all that stuff and etc. And if you all have time, okay, after you are successful in creating this tutorial with Jenkins, I would say create Azure DevOps with Octopus over an Azure website. You will have a tutorial for that also. So you're using a Git, code is in Git, you're using Azure repos, you're using Azure pipelines, pushing it to Octopus, and from there you are pushing it to Azure websites. Even this is a tutorial that is really available out here. So this is the best thing that I have noted with Octopus, even though they do not provide a great SLA and all that stuff, right? It's a good thing that they have a very good documentation that you can kind of follow. So to answer the question in short, yes, there are still a few projects basically who are using Octopus, especially if they are on open sources like AWS and etc. These are very popular tools. But when you're using Azure Cloud and when you're going for a role like Azure DevOps Engineer, highly unlikely you will be using these services.
okay, thank you.
Okay, so please try this out, guys. Try this out and let me know if there are any challenges. And I'll be available even on my WhatsApp number, so you can kind of ping me and kind of get the doubts clarified. So please do this and let me know, and we'll meet on Monday and we'll plan accordingly. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys, and happy Navratri and happy Dasara. Have a great day ahead, and we'll meet on Monday. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you. Wish you too.
Thank you. Thank you.